This video is brought to you by Skillshare. Stay tuned until the end for a special offer on online art classes. Hi everyone, thanks for joining me for today's painting time-lapse and tutorial where I'll be walking you through the steps on how I created this rose oil painting. I don't usually try to paint in photorealism, so this is kind of a new style of video for me, but I hope it's useful, especially for anyone out there learning how to paint flowers. For an extremely thorough 2-hour-long real-time tutorial video that includes instructional voiceover, along with hundreds of hours of other rewards, check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/happydartist. Okay, now let's dive right in. As usual, you'll be able to find a list of all the art supplies used in today's video in the video description. For my reference, I'm using a photo that I found on pexels.com, which is a great website for finding royalty-free reference photos. This video is not sponsored by them, but I just thought I'd share this really useful resource for anyone out there looking to find some royalty-free images that they can use to help them practice and paint and learn how to improve their art skills. The photographer's name is Jonas Kakaroto. I'll be linking his profile and this same image in my video description if you all want to check his page out and give him some love. He has some really beautiful photos of flowers that are very useful for references. Okay, back to the painting. I'm using a 5x5-inch gesso board panel, which is my favorite surface to paint on. For my brushes, I'll be using the Filbert style brush, which has a rounded rectangular shape for the hairs. That's also my favorite brush shape. It's very versatile. And I'm limiting my palette to just 3 primary colors along with black and white. I'm using cadmium red medium, cadmium yellow medium, and phthalo blue. And for my white, it's titanium white, and the black is chromatic black. I started off just mixing a lot of white with a tiny bit of the red to make a light pink, which I used to outline a rough sort of under sketch of the rose, just making sure that my composition looks correct and everything is roughly where it should be. And after that, I went in with a pure cadmium red medium with a tiny bit of black just to darken it a bit to block out some of the darkest areas, which are usually when several petals are touching each other, just the really concentrated shadowy parts between the folds of the petals. And then once I got the darkest areas defined, I kind of just went in with midtones and then highlights. I know that there are a lot of different flower tutorials on YouTube, and a lot of the techniques are vastly different, but for mine, I do like to do it in a more maybe tedious way. Like, I like to actually work on each petal at a time and slowly paint out the different highlights, midtones, and shadows on each individual petal. I know that a lot of tutorials out there will have a faster approach where you can just kind of use one brush stroke to make a petal. For me, I think especially when I'm trying to create something that feels more photorealistic, I do like to take my time and just slowly refine these little details bit by bit. So instead of just using my brush to make one petal from one brush stroke, I'm just slowly chipping away at each petal one at a time. So now that the flower is done, it's honestly kind of mostly stuck within the red family, besides adding bits of black and a lot of the white. I haven't introduced any new colors yet. So now is the time for me to start painting the background, which I hopefully will be able to harmonize the red a bit and make the whole piece feel more interesting with a cool greenish background. This part, I am using a bigger brush, still a filbert, and I'm just trying to follow the exact same technique as I did for the rose petals, where I roughly sketch out the outlines to place every item compositionally where they should be. And then after that, I will slowly fill in the colors, almost like I'm using a coloring book. For the big kind of blurry bokeh spots in the background, I'm just using a big filbert brush and very light kind of circular brush strokes, making sure to vary the direction and angle of the brush stroke so that it looks more organic and it gives that kind of fuzzy, blurry vibe. I'm mixing green by using cadmium yellow medium and phthalo blue, and also introducing bits of black and red to make sure the green isn't too vibrant. One thing that I always like to mention during all of my oil painting tutorials, or I guess any art tutorials, is to make sure to watch out for overly saturating colors, because if there are too many vibrant colors on your painting, they're going to start almost fighting for attention, and they'll start clashing with each other. I always like to reserve the really saturated parts for my focal point. So in this case, it's obviously the pink/red flower, and that's the part with the most kind of pure saturation, where I just used the pure red color and only slightly tweaked it with white and black. But with the background, I don't want the green to be equally saturated, because it's just going to look a little bit chaotic, I guess, in a way. So I make sure to tone down the green by using more white and black to gray it out. And also you can add red into the green to give it a more warm, neutral brown shade. And also, because there's so much red in the flower, it's quite nice to introduce a little bit of the red into the background as well, just to tie in the foreground focal point and the background, so they kind of feel more cohesive and they flow more elegantly into each other. Later on in the piece, I will actually be doing the reverse and putting a little bit of the green into the flower, but I'll save that for later. Okay, now that the background is relatively finished, it's time to start working on those leaves. The very beautiful part about the reference photo is the depth of field. So the leaf that is closer to the camera is sharper, and you can see all the little details and veins, and the leaves that are further from the camera are very blurry and fit in with the kind of hazy, nebulous background. I love that effect, so I'm going to try to replicate it, and I'll start off with just laying down one of the blurry leaves in the back, and then I use a very small filbert brush. I pretty much only use filberts. A very small filbert brush to slowly chip away at the details on the foreground leaf. And because the leaf colors are all very similar, in order for the foreground leaf to stand out against the other leaves in the background, the one kind of defining feature that distinguishes it from the rest is the sharpness in its details. So there are many ways to bring attention to your focal point and highlight it, and one of them is the texture and the density of the details. You can also, of course, use color, like I mentioned before, having one area that's really saturated against the background that's less saturated. But in this case, that one really sharp foreground leaf is elevated from the rest because it just has so much more sharp, small details and has more palpable texture, and it just stands out from the rest of the leaves. I also incorporated a bit of the pink into the highlights of the leaf. I know that the background is usually like a kind of grayish green in this piece, and some of the highlights in the background, I put a tiny touch of blue into them. So I'm just trying to make the whole piece flow more elegantly and give off the effect of light bouncing off from one object and hitting an adjacent object. So I just added a tiny, barely noticeable touch of the pink into the highlights of the leaf, along with a little bit of the bluish tint of the highlights in the background as well. And now for the final step, where I polish off the finishing details. This is probably my favorite step. And like I mentioned before, I'm going to incorporate bits of the background color into the flower, because the flower was predominantly just shades of red, and it felt like it was almost cut and pasted from another painting onto this one. It didn't flow with the rest of the piece. It didn't feel like it belonged in the same environment. So to tie it in more closely with the background and the leaves, I'm just adding touches of green, dark green into the shadows, and hints of the light kind of bluish highlight color from the background. I'm adding that into the highlights of the petals as well. This also helps kind of neutralize the red and not make it so overtly saturated, and it also helps make the petals really pop. So it truly does magnify the dimensions of the flower. It just makes things look way more 3D. And also the flower doesn't stand out so much anymore. Now the whole piece feels a lot more cohesive, and everything is kind of tied elegantly with each other. And that about wraps up this tutorial. I painted this entire thing in one sitting in one day. So as you notice, I didn't use any painting mediums. It was just oil paint and paint thinner to clean my brush. But if you work in light layers and you make sure there's not too much paint on your brush, and if you try to avoid using a lot of painting mediums or paint thinners, it's actually quite easy to manipulate the paint so that you can cram in a lot of detail and a lot of progress with just one layer. Even though I typically don't work in this method and I typically don't paint photorealistic subjects, I still think this was an extremely enjoyable and beneficial exercise because learning how to emulate a reference photo and how to make something look realistic and accurate, it really does strengthen your foundation skills that you can use to apply towards more conceptual or more fantasy-based art. So thank you all so much for watching this. I hope that this tutorial was useful and that I was able to teach you something. I'm always open to suggestions on what you'd like to see in upcoming videos, so if there's a topic or a subject of painting that you've been struggling with and would like to see a tutorial for, feel free to let me know in the comments below. And if you'd like to adopt this cute little pink rose painting, I will be listing the original for sale on my website at happyd-artist.com. Also, since it looks like quarantine isn't ending anytime soon, I decided why not keep extending my spring sale into June. So if you want 20% off of your order of anything from my shop, including originals, just enter the code SPRING at happyd-artist.com and the sale will end June 30th. Thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this video and supporting the art community. Skillshare is an online learning community that offers classes taught by experts and designed for real life, so you can learn and grow at your own pace with short classes that fit your busy routine. Right now is the perfect time to dive into your creative New Year's resolutions for the year 2020. Skillshare's thousands of online art classes make it easy for you to accomplish real growth towards your art goals. Whether you're interested in learning painting, drawing, design, photography, there's always a class for you. I've especially loved the classes that focus on how to use art as a form of self-expression, such as this one taught by Mary Andrew on drawing as self-discovery, and this one on discovering your creative voice taught by the wonderful Chantel Martin. Skillshare's affordable premium membership, which costs less than $10 a month, gives you unlimited access to all of their tens of thousands of classes. So join more than 7 million creators in learning with Skillshare today. Click the link in the description to get 2 free months of premium membership and explore your creativity. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!